On Wednesday, October 30th, another major prophetic event happened, and just about nobody saw it. A meeting of 90 nations where they continued to confirm or strengthen the covenant of the many, the prophecy of Daniel 9:27 that launched the tribulation. You know the one, made in New York City by the UN back on September 22nd, 2024. Probably the most significant prophecy fulfillment in the last 1950 years. And it continues to be fulfilled right before our eyes. And probably most of you didn't see it because the media doesn't cover this stuff. And because we've just got the wrong picture in our minds of what that biblical prophecy, Daniel 9:27, is going to be about. The prophecy launched the tribulation, as we said, on October 2nd to 3rd, the Feast of Trumpets, and another milestone was achieved this week, taking us one step closer. And I bet someone is down, writing in the comments right now, did they finally sign it? Is October 30th now the start of a tribulation? Those are not the correct questions or the correct understanding of Daniel 9:27. Those questions are kind of like a left behind version of what was going to happen as opposed to the biblical version. Now, Left Behind is a series of 16 books which have sold like 80 million copies, spun off 2 movies, and even a video game. I bet you've heard of it. So it's not surprising. Its version of reality is what people think the Bible says. You probably remember the movie. The Antichrist said, "We announced the sharing of food with the world and the building of this Jewish temple as a symbol for all humanity. This marks the beginning of our 7-year peace." And that was the basis for the movie's covenant. The Antichrist mentor then says, "Bring us back that olive branch." And he was alluding to a peace treaty. Amazingly, that is kind of what did happen, that part. Then, under the symbol of the UN and its olive branch, the Antichrist meets with 10 regional leaders and appoints them to be 10 kings. And all of this seemed to happen like on one day. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and today we're going to explain what happened on October 30th, that major prophetic event. But first, we've got to explain what's mistaken in the movie version and what the Bible truly says, because what happened on Wednesday, October 30th, that fulfills the Bible is not in the movie version. So here are the 7 main points that I gathered from the movie clips, and the Bible clearly doesn't state any of them. So listen carefully. 1. The Antichrist makes the covenant personally. 2. The Antichrist becomes a hero and begins to reign immediately. 3. The events of the covenant happen in only one day. 4. The covenant has a 7-year termination date. 5. The Antichrist appoints the 10 kings. 6. The Antichrist is a white-skinned European. 7. Israel was involved, and the building of a temple was linked to it. So, when we announced that we thought the tribulation may have likely begun on October 2nd and 3rd of this year, we got comments like this on Facebook. Seeing as how none of the prophecies concerning Daniel's 70th week have been fulfilled, logic and reason dictate the tribulation has not started. Well, what prophecies was this person talking about? The movie version prophecies or the Bible? Because what the Bible says about the covenant may be different than the movie. Here is the passage about that from Daniel 9:27, the real Bible. "And he will strengthen a covenant with the many for 1 week." So let's look at each of the movie's false interpretations of the prophecy in order. Remember, we're doing this first before we get to October 30th, so you can interpret what just happened properly. 1. The Antichrist makes the covenant personally. A prince of the covenant is involved in the covenant. There's no doubt about that. And this person may be the Antichrist, but he doesn't make or even confirm the covenant. He strengthens or prevails an existing covenant upon the many or even over the many for a period of 7 years. In our previous videos, we explained the verb in this sentence is gabar, which is actually an adjective meaning strong or powerful, but it's in this strange hifel form of the Hebrew language that makes it a verb and requires the subject of the sentence cause the action. So the prince causes the covenant to become strong or powerful, and this implies a pre-existing covenant that the prince causes to be used to overpower the many. He may not do it himself. The prince of the covenant can be behind the scenes and may or may not have been involved in the actual making of the covenant based on the biblical text, because he causes it to be strengthened or he causes it to overcome people. This is probably the biggest misconception about the covenant, and it's all thanks to Left Behind books in the movie. The prince doesn't sign or make a covenant. He empowers it. And that is what's happening right now. We'll talk about it in a second. Number 2, the Antichrist becomes a hero and begins to reign immediately. This is also totally wrong. Maybe in the movie, but it's wrong. According to 2 Thessalonians 2, 3-4, the Antichrist is revealed to the world at the midpoint of a tribulation, at the abomination of desolation, when he sits in the temple of God and declares himself to be God. Although the Prince of the Covenant is definitely involved from the very beginning, people may not know he's the Antichrist at that point. This is another of those misconceptions that have people ignoring the major biblical events that are taking place right now in front of our eyes. Number 3, the events of the covenant happen in one day. On October 3rd, which was the Feast of Trumpets, I received a bevy of messages saying, "What happened October 2nd?" As if everything had to have happened on that one day. The prophecy says the prince causes the pre-existing covenant, see, it existed beforehand, to prevail over the many for 1 week, which is 7 years. It doesn't say. He causes this for 2,550 days. This is important. It's a prophecy based on years, not on days. As long as he causes the covenant to prevail this year, this biblical year, it's going to meet the requirement. Now, on the exact Feast of Trumpets day, however, an international alliance was formed to force the two-state solution. And in my opinion, it's this group who will be enforcing the pre-existing covenant on Israel and dividing their land. And something regarding this group happened on October 30th. That's what we're talking about today. If you need to understand this a little fuller, look at this. The entire 70 weeks prophecy was written in this year-by-year process. In Daniel 9:25, just 2 verses previous to the one we've been looking at, we see this type of language used. Know and understand this: from the issuance of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of distress. Does this mean Jesus came to the Jews on the exact first day of the year, the Feast of Trumpets, or that decree to rebuild happened on the first day of the year, the Feast of Trumpets, or that the streets and moats were finished on the exact first day? No, no one that I know believes that. However, people want to say that the covenant has to happen on the first day of the year. Unfortunately, most people don't realize these things happened during the year. As long as they happen in that year, that's what matters. This verse was on the minds of people. In the days of John the Baptist, in 27 AD, the Pharisees came and asked John if he was Messiah. According to Luke 3:15, all the people were in great expectation of the Messiah's arrival as well. So everybody was looking and asking John if he was the Messiah. Why? Because this was the year. The 7 weeks and the 62 weeks ended. But did John point out Jesus on that very day, on that exact first day of the year? No. It happened a little later, during the year. And the Antichrist will cause the covenant to be forced on the many for 7 years, and that enforcement has started on October 3rd, but it hasn't finished yet. There may be many enforcements actually during the 7 years. Point 4, the covenant has a 7-year termination date, and left behind, the Antichrist says the 7 years of my peace has begun. What's going to happen after 7 years, Antichrist? This is also a misreading of Daniel 9:27. There it says the prince causes the prevailing of the covenant, and he does it for 7 years. It's not that the covenant is going to expire in 7 years. It will end in 7 years because Jesus is going to return and he will end it. So no one should say the UN Pact for the Future didn't say 7 years, because of course it didn't. That's not biblical. It's not what we should be looking for. Number 5, the Antichrist appoints the 10 kings. In Left Behind, the Antichrist appoints the 10 kings. In the Bible, Revelation 17:17, it's the 10 kings who actually appoint or give their power to the Antichrist. It's the exact opposite of Left Behind. And this won't happen until the midpoint of a tribulation when the Antichrist is revealed. So if you're looking for 10 kings now, you're looking for the wrong thing. Point 6, the Antichrist is a white-skinned European in Left Behind. Well, he might be in real life or not. We know from Daniel 9:26 that the people of the Prince of the Covenant destroyed the temple in 70 AD. In the forces, however, of Titus that did this deed, there were some Romans, but many more Middle Easterners who were conscripted into the army. So the temple was destroyed by Romans and Middle Easterners. We shouldn't just be looking for a European. This will be important in a moment, as you'll see. 7. Israel is the many, and the building of a temple is linked to the covenant. Now, the Bible calls those who the prince prevails the covenant upon the many. It doesn't say if they're Israelis or not. It also doesn't say anything about Israel trading land for the right to build a third temple. This is speculation on the part of the Left Behind authors. It is not biblical fact. Now, it may be true, or it may not be true. So, what do we know from the Bible? We know that it's a covenant that is created with the many. Maybe the many is all the people on earth. And this actually happened on September 22nd, 2024, when the United Nations, with its olive branch symbol, approved the most powerful covenant in the history of the world with all the nations. And we know that on the first day of the new year, the Feast of Trumpets, an international alliance of nations, including the EU, USA, Middle Eastern, and African nations, were formed by Prince Mohammed bin Salman with the expressed intent to force or prevail the covenant upon Israel and cause them to divide their land. So it did start on the Feast of Trumpets. You see, this pact for the future gives the nations the power to force Israel to do this, and the alliance plans to do just that. So with that in mind, they met for the first time on Wednesday, October 30th, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Here's a clip.
Today, we convened to propose a global alliance for the implementation of the two-state solution. Of course, from our perspective, from the kingdom's perspective at least, primarily with a focus on establishing the Palestinian state. In the wake of our discussions, we will organize practical follow-up meetings at the senior working level. These meetings will focus on the action points identified during today's ministerial meeting aimed at advancing UN and other related peace efforts in the context of implementing the two-state solution. Well over 90 countries, almost 60 ministers, showing how much interest there is and how much focus there is on actually moving towards a permanent settlement of the Palestinian conflict.
The Saudi government said the first meeting of the Global Alliance for the implementation of a two-state solution, there's its name, reached practical steps to support the UN Pact and established a timeline for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state and the end of what they call the Israeli occupation. The dividing of Israel is contrary, of course, to the Abrahamic covenant, which gives all the land to Israel. And it's something Jesus absolutely hates. And he will judge all the nations who do this upon his glorious return, as per Joel 3:2. Now, Prince Mohammed bin Salman chaired the meeting, and I find this character very interesting. He is, after all, a possible candidate for the Prince of the Covenant because of what he's doing. Now, he's not the only one. You probably have your favorite, but he is a candidate, and you should keep your eyes on him. First, he's a prince, as in the Prince of the Covenant. Second, He's strongly involved in this prevailing of the covenant that started on October 3rd, had another meeting on October 30th. Third, he is directly linked to all 4 solar eclipses that are related to this covenant in an incredibly odd set of circumstances. Listen to this. On the day after each of these solar eclipses, 3 of which were the famous Aleph Tav eclipses across the USA, we talked about them in the spring, he met with the U.S. Secretary of State to discuss the dividing of Israel. So all 4 times he did that. August 2017, October 2023, April 8th, 2024, and now October 3rd, 2024. Yes, there was a solar eclipse on the night of the Feast of Trumpets at exactly the same time as the new moon. And every time Mohammed bin Salman was involved the day after. That is an incredible set of coincidences. What do you guys think? We put out a poll right after MBS launched this committee, and 67% of you guys, a full 2/3 of the 2,000 who responded, thought he was either the Antichrist or the Prince of the Covenant, but the Prince of the Covenant wasn't the Antichrist. That's a pretty shocking number. I'm sure our community may be the only ones on the internet aware enough to see this possibility, and I think he deserves close attention. So what's going to happen next? The Alliance scheduled future meetings. The next one is November 11th. This is a very interesting and biblical date also. It's Chesvan 10. 7 exact biblical years from now, on this date, we expect it to be Daniel's 1290th day, and probably the sheep and goat judgment. Have you noticed that the Saudis seem to be picking biblical days for their meetings? However, these additional meetings mean we need to be patient in terms of what happens this year. The first year of the tribulation, in our opinion, that ends next Feast of Trumpets. My best guess is that Israel is divided and the sacrifices start on the Temple Mount. Plans could also be made to either build a temple, or maybe they'll give Israel some sort of accommodation, either the use of the Dome of the Rock or a place to set up a tabernacle tent. I do think Left Behind might be right about those kind of things. Those kind of things could possibly happen. So, do you want to guess from us on when the two-state solution is signed? Well, this is just a guess, but there is a 5th eclipse in 2025, and it takes place on March 29th. So, we think it might happen on the next day. So what is that next day? Remember how MBS met with the U.S. and world leaders on the day after the last 4? So what's that day? It's Nisan 1. It's Nisan 1, the first day of a Jewish religious year. Now, we're not saying it will happen that day, but I'm circling that day on my calendar to watch. And for the research clips on this video, a shout out goes to our advisory board of Fisherman, Michael Terran, Ryan Rigo, and Britt Ashley, and also to William Warren. Now, we answered a lot of your additional questions today about the start of the tribulation, but I'm aware you might have even more. So click right here to keep watching our video that explains answers to the 8 toughest questions we received about this year being the start of a tribulation. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.